Hello, my name is Madison Zerzan, and I did my place narrative on Niagara Falls, which is a natural wonder from the New World. Niagara Falls is located on the US-Canadian border of New York and Ontario, which connects the Great Lakes of Ontario and Lake Erie. Niagara Falls has a reputation of being beautiful, grand, and thrilling. So, when I went on my first trip into Canada, I was pretty excited to go there. I went the summer before freshman year of college. I had no knowledge of what the falls were like, but I assumed it would be like a national park, pretty secluded and preserved from human society. I have never, at this point, I had never been to a national park, so I was just guessing. But from what I had heard, I didn't think there would be a lot of activity and it'd be mostly just nature. However, my expectations were not met. When I entered the Niagara Falls area, I came through the Canadian side of the falls, and it was as far away from secluded as you could get. It was a permanent fairground with rides, water parks, restaurants, gift shops, and a lot of people. And I mean a lot of people. It was a shocking discovery to see that this fairground had taken over the people's attention from the falls, and instead of the falls being the focal point, it just seemed to fade into the background. Most people were there with their families and their children, and most of the time you would see them hanging around at the fairs and on the rides, and not a lot of attention or importance was placed on the falls, which I was a bit disappointed about. Looking around at my surroundings, a question of how the falls got there came to mind, hence why I chose to do my project on this area. Every story needs a beginning, and the Niagara Falls beginning started approximately 12,000 years ago at the end of the last ice age. Giant melting glaciers carved out the Great Lakes and the Niagara River, and as water from Lake Erie started to flow over the Niagara Escarpment, rocks slowly eroded upriver. This is a slow process, so over a millennia had to pass in order for the falls to be created and in the place that we know today. Before the involvement of man, the Niagara Falls was just a landscape showing Earth's natural history. The first human settlers of this land were the indigenous people of the area, specifically the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe. The falls were seen as a sacred place that held spiritual and cultural meaning for the indigenous peoples of the area. The falls have been a place for one of the Haudenosaunee tribes, the Seneca Nation, to honor the gods and thank them for their kindness, which stems from the tale of the Maiden of the Mist. A young girl by the name of Layla Walla was married at a young age. However, her husband soon died after, and she was overcome with grief. Then she went into her canoe and went down the Niagara River. The current took control of her and her boat, and she swiftly went over the edge of the falls. Hano, the god of thunder and lightning, lived underneath the falls. He saw her falling and caught her. Hano brought the maiden to his home under the falls, where she healed from her injuries, as well as her broken heart. One day a serpent came to the river and poisoned it, then fed off those that died from the waters. Lenawala saw the serpent and emerged from the mist from the falls to tell her people to leave, and they did. The serpent came back and was furious to see that the village was gone. It hissed and began to search for them. Heno heard the serpent and fought it with a great thunderbolt that killed the serpent. Its body became lodged underneath the falls, which redirected the water into the home of the gods. Heno took his family and the maiden into the sky to their new home, where they could then watch over the people of the earth. The falls are featured in other tales of mythology of indigenous cultures and traditions. These stories and legends reflect the deep connection that the indigenous people had for the falls as a spiritual place. The river provided essential resources for survival, like fresh water and fish, to the native people. The indigenous people practiced sustainable fishing techniques by taking only what they needed and to ensure that the river and its bounty would survive for their future generations. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy had a system of governance to ensure that the Niagara region remained balanced and thriving for generations to come. The arrival of European settlers in the Niagara region caused a shift in how the falls were used and perceived. For European explorers and settlers, the falls represented an opportunity for conquest. In 1678, a French explorer named Father Louis Hennepin became the first European to come across the falls. He described the falls as a prodigious cadence of water. His accounts of the falls intrigued Europe and sparked a fascination with this new world wonder. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy were forced to cede land through treaties that were often negotiated under duress or just outright violations from the settlers. As settlers moved into the region, the indigenous people were pushed into smaller and less fertile reserves, limiting their access to the Niagara River and its resources. With restricted access to the falls, indigenous communities lost their ability to perform traditional ceremonies and maintain spiritual practices tied to the landscape. The indigenous peoples were subjected to policies aimed at assimilation to eradicate their languages, traditions, and connections to the land. As settlers expanded their presence, the Niagara River became a key resource for early industries such as milling and shipbuilding. However, these industries often operated without regulation, leading to degradation of the environment. Settlers introduced new fishing techniques that depleted fish populations in the river, and the clearing of forests for farmland and industry disrupted ecosystems and displaced many wildlife. Niagara Falls soon became a destination for wealthy European and American tourists. Private landowners capitalized on the growing interest and would charge fees for people to access viewpoints, and they also put up fences to control access. Europeans primarily approached the falls with a from dimension as they focused on how they could use the falls as a source of economic and industrial gain. By the 19th century, the falls became a symbol of North American identity and was celebrated as a natural wonder that set the continent apart from Europe's architectural marvels. Colonial expansion prioritized dominance and transformation of the environment, and this stood in a stark contrast to indigenous relationships with the falls, which were deeply rooted in mutual respect and balance. The falls started to become a symbol of technological innovation to harness nature's power. This era marked a shift from the falls' identity being a natural wonder to a hub of industry and technology. Niagara Falls has an immense water flow. 3,160 tons of water every second goes over the edge. It was able to be recognized as a valuable resource for generating power, which became a central focus during the Industrial Revolution. The Adams Power Plant transformed Niagara Falls into a global icon for electrical engineering. It was designed by Nikola Tesla and George Westinghouse. The plant utilized Tesla's alternating current system, which revolutionized the ability to transmit electricity over far distances. Factories along the river discharged untreated industrial waste into the water, leading to significant pollution. By the mid-20th century, the river became a dumping ground for chemicals, threatening aquatic ecosystems and public health. Deforestation and habitat deconstruction along the riverbanks disrupted local wildlife, contributing to a decline in species that had thrived in the area before. Extensive water diversion for hydroelectric power reduced the flow of water over the falls, which diminished its visual and natural appeal. By the 1950s, efforts to balance industrial use with tourism began through international agreements like the Niagara Treaty. Niagara Falls remained a popular tourist destination. The fall's sublime beauty was now part of a transactional relationship, where its value was determined by its ability to draw crowds and generate revenue. There was construction of infrastructure to accommodate growing tourism and industrial interests. Bridges, roads, and viewing platforms began to alter the natural landscape, creating an emphasis on reshaping the falls to suit human needs and wants. As industries diverted significant amounts of water for power, the visual of the falls diminished, drawing criticism from both local and international travelers. Landscape architect Frederick Law Olmsted argued for the need to preserve the falls as a public good. Influenced by Romanticism, early visitors viewed the falls as a symbol of the sublime. The first organized effort to preserve Niagara Falls came with the formation of the Niagara Falls Association in 1883. The NFA aimed to prevent further industrial encroachment and to secure public access to the falls. This effort contributed to the establishment of Niagara Falls State Park in 1885 on the United States side, making it the first state park in the United States. The park aimed to restore and protect the natural beauty of the falls, ensuring public access while limiting industrial exploitation. Niagara Falls required international cooperation as the river and its resources spanned the U.S.-Canadian border. The Boundary Water Treaty established the International Joint Commission to oversee and regulate the use of boundary waters, including the Niagara River. The Niagara Diversion Treaty of 1950 was signed between the United States and Canada to balance industrial and preservationist priorities. The treaty established strict guidelines for water diversion, ensuring that a minimum flow of water would be maintained over the falls during the day to support tourism, while allowing greater division at night for hydroelectric power. In 1969, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers undertook a project to turn off the American Falls. For several months, water was diverted away to steady erosion and stabilize the rock face, which was predicted to be threatening to the fall's future. Public reaction was a mix of awe and concern. This event was significant to prove the importance of preserving the fall's natural beauty while managing its structural integrity. This era prioritized extraction from nature for human use, making the falls a symbol of human progress and engineering achievement. Tourists gathered to witness the fall's beauty with admiration for its natural awe along with its technological progress, and early preservation efforts reflected a growing awareness for the independence of the fall's beauty. The modern era of Niagara Falls reflects a shift towards sustainability. While industrial activity continues in the region, contemporary efforts prioritize environmental conservation, cultural heritage, and equitable resource management. Modern facilities on the Niagara River such as the Robert Moses Niagara Power Plant and Sir Adam Beck generating stations divert water for energy generation under the guidelines of the Niagara Diversion Treaty. Hydroelectric power generated at Niagara provides clean energy to millions, aligning with global efforts to reduce carbon emissions. Niagara Falls gained more fame as a romantic getaway for newlyweds, a tradition that began in the late 19th century. Its popularity soared in the 20th century, with marketing campaigns emphasizing its romantic and majestic qualities. The falls also attracted thrill-seekers and performers, like Annie Edson Taylor, who became the first person to survive going over the falls in a barrel in 1901. These stunts have drawn massive crowds, with 14 people purposefully going over the falls, 5 of which did not survive. Today, Niagara Falls remains one of the most visited tourist destinations in North America, with millions of visitors annually. I was able to see many of the key attractions at Niagara Falls during my trip. I went on the Maid of the Mist, which was inspired by the indigenous legend. I also went on the Skylon Tower and the Niagara Observation Tower. I went on the Journey Behind the Falls, which you were able to go into caves and see the back of the falls. And my dad said that the cave was shaking while we were inside, but I didn't feel anything. And I also went to the Cave of the Winds. Niagara Falls still continues to provide hydroelectric power to Canada and the United States. It is also still primarily a tourist destination with millions of yearly visitors, and collaborative governance with the US and Canada helps preserve the falls while integrating tourism and energy use in a sustainable way. Today, efforts to recognize and restore Indigenous connections to the falls are growing. Parks and visitor centers increasingly include Indigenous perspectives, reflecting on the gradual shift towards acknowledging the injustices of the past. The era of European settlement started the path of industrial and commercial exploitation of Niagara Falls. While it didn't introduce the falls to the world and created many economic opportunities, it also started the pattern of environmental and cultural disruption. The Industrial Revolution celebrated human dominance over nature, with hydroelectric power attracting industries and jobs, thus transforming the region into an economic powerhouse. The treaties and preservationist movements of this era helped redefine the people's relationship with Niagara Falls, as the establishment of parks and international agreements highlighted the importance of preserving natural wonders for future generations. The different sides of the Niagara River show how the impact of industry and conservation has had on the area. The area, in a way, shows the history of the falls being lost to industry, but then found again under conservation efforts to bring back appreciation for its natural beauty. Thank you for listening, and these are my resources.